Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of AKwx, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 20th of November now. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for the very latest weather information for your community. That's weather.gov/Alaska. And you can look at smaller sections of Alaska if you really want to focus on the Kenai Peninsula and Anchorage or Southwest. Head to weather.gov/Anchorage. If you want to look at the interior and the North Slope or perhaps Kotzebue Sound, weather.gov/Fairbanks will get you there. And for Southeast and all of the Panhandle, it's weather.gov/Juneau. Of course. You can find us on Facebook, as many of you have in the last couple days. NWS Alaska is the place to go there for the entire state. And the same rule applies for Twitter as it does for those local websites. You can go to NWS Juneau or NWS Anchorage or NWS Fairbanks, see if I can get that out, and follow each individual office's region, or you can look at the entire state at NWS Alaska. And if you want to tell us something about the weather in your community, we love to see your weather pictures. We love to get your weather reports, and we really love to know if you ever have damage from that weather. That helps us do a better job and track how bad that storm was. You can use the hashtag AKwx. That lets us know you're talking about Alaska weather. And find us on YouTube during the afternoon. Around 4 o'clock or so, you'll get your daily afternoon weather briefing. Same maps you'll see here a little bit later on in the evening on Alaska weather. The hazardous weather outlook for central Alaska as well as south central Alaska is changing. We've got a lot going on there, but let's focus on some of the remaining issues going on across the Klondike Highway region and the Taya Inlet for tonight. First of all, blizzard warning continues for about another 30 minutes or so. Going up toward White Pass, blizzard conditions have been reported there. And on the Yukon side of the highway, there's been an avalanche, and for at least a time today, the highway has been closed. So before you leave, you might want to check on conditions there, and of course, there'll be updates there closer to the highway itself. Now, there's also a high wind warning that's going to go into effect there a little bit later on tonight and into tomorrow. As a result of that, we're expecting winds around the Skagway region as well to gust upwards of 60 to 65 miles per hour. So winds are still going to be blowing, but the combination of wind and poor visibility and snow falling is going to slow down a little bit there. But the winds are still going to be an issue around the Taya Inlet as well as the Skagway region and the White Pass area. So keep that in mind if you're doing any traveling or driving. If it were me, I'd probably stay home and just sit by the fire. It sounds a lot better tonight. Here's a look around the central and southern parts of the interior and south central Alaska. Every one of those yellow areas is a place that it's going to be snowing at least some amount. And in the red shaded areas, it's going to be snowing a little bit more. So those are winter storm warnings. Let's focus on McGrath. And you'll notice there, including the McGrath region around the upper Kuskokwim Valley, are expecting considerable amounts of snow. In fact, about 1 to 1.5 feet of snow possible by the time this particular event is over. Looks like we're going to see probably on the order of 10 to 18 inches in some cases there with a winter storm warning that will take us into tonight and tomorrow. So plan for additional snowfall there on top of what you may already have. Now, for many areas of the central interior, the eastern interior, as well as Eagle, all the way down to Northway, especially east of Delta Junction, including the middle Tanana Valley and the central interior around Tanana itself, we're talking about a winter weather advisory. About 4 to 7 inches of snow seems to be the best forecast right now. That's also going to include areas around the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. And we're expecting that the heaviest amounts of snow will be generally east of Delta Junction there. So this is going to pick up as we head through the daytime tomorrow, starting at 6 o'clock and going till about 6 a.m. on Sunday. So most of your daytime tomorrow, and really most of the night tomorrow and into early Sunday morning, you should expect it to snow. And that's probably going to slow things down on the Richardson a little bit in the Steese. And again, mostly east of Delta Junction is where the heavier amounts of snow will be. So wrap that into your plans if you're doing any driving and you're not just going to hunker down in the interior this weekend. Now, for areas in the Copper River Basin, the Matanuska Valley, as well as the Anchorage Bowl, snow is coming as well. Snow is going to start up a little bit more in earnest later on this evening and into tomorrow, and as a result, we are expecting some accumulations in this region, generally light around the Anchorage region, about 2 to 4 tonight, and then a couple more inches tomorrow. And again, many areas south of the highway in the Copper River Basin are expected to see higher numbers there. Those could be upwards of about 4 to 8 in the Copper River Basin. So plan on some changing weather conditions on really most of the road system north and including Anchorage for the Klondike Highway, for the interior, and then as we head northward, we're still expecting winter storm warnings there to extend north of Fairbanks and west for Bettles and Ambler. Considerable amounts of snow there expected there, about 4 to 8 inches of snow. And for the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, also looking at about 4 to 7 inches of snow. That'll continue through tonight and into tomorrow. Not to be left out, our friends in Gamble and Savunga and St. Lawrence Island, you are under a winter weather advisory for just a little longer tonight until about 6 o'clock. Plan on that continuing to bring you about 1 to 2 inches of snow. It's the visibility that's going to be the biggest issue with there, not the amount of snow that you see. So have fun, be careful, and yeah, stay warm as we start up our weekend. Let's take a look at the weather now. As we look at the satellite picture, you'll see this very long fetch of moisture working across the Aleutians and into southwestern Alaska. The main core of the low pressure system that's affecting most parts of Alaska now with wintry weather is right here. It's moving through southwest Alaska and the western part of the Gulf. Behind that, a trail of moisture. There are many more impulses, though, that are coming in pretty quickly right behind this. So it's going to keep the weather very active over the next several days and through the rest of the weekend for that matter. And watch this one more time. And you can see as that southwesterly track is moving closer and closer to the Gulf, you can pick up a few more of those circulations moving away from East Asia. Remember, this is a really big map, so these storms are actually moving fairly quickly. The jet stream is located right over southern Alaska today, and the winds there are well over 180 miles per hour, around 30,000 feet or so. So it is no trouble at all for these storms to move very quickly from west to east. Here's a look at the rest of the state, and you can see southeastern Alaska is also in prime position to get wind and rain. Most of the snowfall will be at a higher elevation. Freezing levels were going up in advance of the storm. For south central, cold weather will be wrapping in. The winds are coming in from more of a westerly direction, so this is going to be a better situation for snow on the eastern side of Anchorage this time, as well as into the Matanuska Valley and for the Copper River Basin. It's also spreading snow across the interior as we head through the daytime tomorrow. So once again, about 4 to 7 inches of snow is expected there for many around the Fairbanks region, west and to the east, and into the hills as well. So plan your travel accordingly once again. Across the west, we're also watching what's coming next. As we head into the weekend, there's going to be a much stronger storm forming in the western Bering. And we're going to have to keep close watch on that as we get into Sunday and Monday, because it is going to have some pretty good wind with it, and it could send some pretty decent waves closer to the coast. So for those on the west coast, as we head into Sunday and Monday, make sure you're keeping track of the weather as well. This is your fair warning. And again, if there's any watches, warnings, or advisories, make sure you have a way to get those, whether it's your NOAA Weather Radio, Marine VHF, or simply knowing the community member outside of your village that can help give you that weather information when you give them a call. Here's a look at the weather map. As of this afternoon, low pressure was still moving over southwest around 987 millibars. You can see that southwesterly flow moving through southeast, bringing rainfall there. Most of that fairly light today. Cordova picked up well over an inch of rainfall. And on the northern end, we have low pressure working out of Norton Sound and over the Seward Peninsula. This is going to track closer to the Yukon Valley and the Tanana Valley as we head through the next 24 hours. That's what's bringing the snow to the interior. Out across the west, another weak wave moving through the western Bering Sea. Not a whole lot going on with that right now, but we're going to watch what's coming in behind that. You'll see that on the next map in just a moment. By tonight, low pressure will be moving over the Copper River Basin. As that does so, it's around 984 millibars. The front will swing through southeast, keeping rainfall going there and stirring up the wind for the interior and southwest. Look for periods of snowfall there. A little bit more of a north and westerly flow working over the west coast. Most of those areas of snow will be passing in nature and showery. and low pressure working just west of the Pribilofs is dropping to about 1,011 millibars with snow showers for the chain. You start to get a hint of that next weather maker moving into the western Aleutians by Saturday night. Still not really in our weather picture just yet. As you look across the interior, that wave of low pressure working through in the central part of the state will be working pretty hard to create that 4 to 7 inches of snow. The bigger player will be across the southern coast at 999 millibars, and once again the pressure gradient for southeast will stay up there, so winds are going to be gusty, not only in southeast but also across south central Alaska. You'll notice our low pressure system out across the Bering is still holding about the same level as it did overnight. Snow showers will be falling across Nunivak Island and St. Lawrence Island all the way down to the Pribilofs. Periods of rain and snow may mix for the eastern parts of the chain. Now here's Sunday, and there's our new storm at 967 millibars. The front's crossing over the central chain. With that, we expect much stronger winds on either side of that frontal boundary, and this again will bring in some much stronger winds across the west coast, and depending on exactly what track it takes, this could affect your community, or it may entirely miss us and then move into the Gulf. So if you're on the west coast in southwest Alaska or all the way up toward the Seward Peninsula, you want to keep close watch in the storm, and again, be mindful of any watches, warnings, or advisories that are affecting your community as we get into Sunday night or Monday. In the meantime, things should be quieting down across the interior and south central and southeast. Not entirely quiet or silent, but certainly a little bit less active there. High pressure is trying to set up across the Alcan border. We expect another round of snow to move into south central, probably in the afternoon and evening, and snow showers will continue across the upper Yukon Valley and the Noatak and Kobuk valleys, as well as the upper Kuskokwim. This all after an early weekend event of snow for many of those same locations. Now, as we look at temperatures tonight, 30s and 40s for most of southeast, south central around Prince William Sound, we saw mid to upper 30s. Montague Island was 43, 42 in Homer, 22 in Anchorage by 3 o'clock. It looked like Fairbanks was holding around 17. It was 0 in Fort Yukon and only 13 below in Arctic Village. 3 below for Barrow, 2 in Kivalina. Kotzebue had 11, 18 in Shishmaref, and 16 in Nome, 23 for Unalakleet, and 27 in McGrath. Again, expecting snowfall. 26 in Bethel, southwestern Alaska. A little bit milder today. Temperatures were generally above freezing from Lake Iliamna all the way westward. And along the Alaska Peninsula, we saw 30s and 40s. Sandpoint was holding in the lower 40s there, with 39 in Kodiak and 46 in Akiak. One of the warmer spots today actually made it up to about 47, 38 in Attu and 31 in St. Paul. Overnight low temperatures will stay in the teens and 20s. So one interesting thing about Alaska is sometimes it actually has to warm up to snow. That's not a broken weather rule. It's simply a notice that moisture moves in that raises the temperature as that happens. So teens and 20s for most of the interior, southwest in the teens and 20s as well. South central, a few places will hover very close to, but probably just below that freezing point. Southeast in the lower 40s there as the winds come up. Overnight low temperatures across the Arctic coast, anywhere from 5 to 10 below. Savunga looking at 19, and the chain in the Alaska Peninsula in the 30s, with highs tomorrow not changing much there, looking for most areas just below that 40-degree mark. Kodiak 38, Bethel 21. Nome at 19, 6 below in Barrow. Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse not a whole lot warmer, but just a hair. 20 degrees in Fairbanks again with snow falling tomorrow. South Central looking at temps in the lower 30s, 38 in Kodiak, and mid to upper 40s for southeast. Again, a little bit on the mild side. Flying weather includes IFR conditions expected for the Copper River Basin and around parts of South Central, especially the Matanuska Valley tomorrow and the western Alaska Range. MVFR through most of the interior and the lower terrain there. And southeast hit and miss MVFR with IFR conditions across some of the higher terrain and MVFR for the Chukchi Seacoast and Kotzebue Sound. And Aktuvik Pass expected to maybe see VFR briefly in the morning, but probably going all the way for IFR by the afternoon. Adigan Pass should see some improvements during the midday, but again, watch for IFR to return late in the day. Some question marks there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, IFR conditions are expected through most of the day. Some improvements in Rainy Pass for Saturday. And Windy Pass, we expect to see MVFR throughout the afternoon. Isabel Pass should lean over toward MVFR by early to mid-afternoon for your Saturday. Mentasta Pass probably holding it, marginal conditions through most of the day. Tonita Pass, we expect IFR to start, so you might have to hold off there for a little while. Portage Pass, we expect improvements with more improvements on the western side. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we do expect some marginal improvements by the afternoon. Freezing levels show that most of the state, of course, is below freezing at this point. You can see that warm injection of air in the upper levels all the way from the Wrangell-St. Elias region down the coastline of the southeastern parts of Alaska. As high as 10,000 feet, most of that's out over the central Gulf, but you can see the 2,000-foot freezing level there over Prince William Sound and well south of Kodiak Island and most of the Aleutian chain. Icing potential is going to be with us through the interior. That's anywhere below 6 to about 8,000 feet the further south you go, over south central Alaska, especially the Anchorage Bowl, and to about Klondike and the Klondike Highway region, Taya Inlet around Skagway, and the northern parts of the Gulf Coast. Also across southwestern Alaska from about Cape Neuenham all the way out toward the Pribilofs, generally below 7,000 feet. Most of that should be isolated moderate. The jet stream has several waves. Each one of these waves represents a little bit of a push in the storm-making system there. You can see those wind speeds predicted to be 100 to 150 knots there. Today we measured those upwards around 160 knots, so pretty fast stuff. And a general westerly flow sweeping across Alaska and the Gulf makes those storms just zip right over us, and some of them can be fairly strong. For the interior, the wind speeds at 9,000 feet from 10 to 15 knots, much stronger over the Gulf and the south coast, 40 to 60 knots there. Out over the Bering, anywhere from 35 to 50 knots, including over the chain. At 3,000 feet, really not much of a change. Slower winds across the interior, 10 to 20 knots at their strongest. Over the west coast, 10 to 25 knots. Kodiak Island looking at a westerly flow at 50 knots, and southeast looking at winds from the west-southwest at about 50 to 60 knots. So turbulence potential developing and staying with us over southeast below 6,000 feet. Also across the Alaska Range in the west over the Pribilofs, Nunivak Island, and southward. Watch for some moderate possibilities there, and developing areas of turbulence in the far western chain. Watch for isolated moderate across most of the northern coast as well as Kodiak Island. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our distinguished guest this evening is Dr. Melchior Antuñano. He's the director of the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, commonly referred to as CAMI. We're very fortunate to have such an internationally recognized expert as Dr. Mel in Anchorage. He's here at the invitation of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and will be the guest speaker tomorrow at our fall safety seminar, which begins at 8 a.m. It's at the Coast International Hotel at Lake Hood, and it'll go all day. The seminar is free and it's made possible by members like you and your donations and membership throughout the year. Also, on Hangar Flying, in the next couple weeks, we will be featuring Dr. Mel and some of the presentations that he's able to make tomorrow. We will summarize them, having him talk about those topics, so you all in the bush who can't come to, or in Anchorage who can't come to the seminar, will have the benefit of Dr. Mel's experience and knowledge. Dr. Mel, welcome to Hangar Flying.
Oh, thank you very much.
I've got to tell you that Dr. Mel has got an extraordinary resume. Medical doctor, chief flight surgeon for the FAA. He's credited with over 705 professional presentations and lectures around the world. He's published over 60 scientific publications. He's past president, or past chancellor of probably every distinguished aerospace organization in the country, and even overseas. He's received 81 awards and recognitions for his efforts. We are truly fortunate to have you on our program. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So, Dr. Mel, I know this is not your first trip to Alaska, but I also know in the past couple of days you've been able to see and hear some special things. Let's start with today. What do you think of your ride in the Top Cub?
Oh, it was one of the most exciting flights I have ever had in my life. In fact, I kept telling your colleagues that I'm so jealous of the type of flying that you can do in Alaska. And it's not just being able to go where you go, but in many cases, the skills that are required to do some of those special operations, landing in unprepared runways, really the challenge of being technically proficient, but at the same time is doing it with enjoyment. And that's one thing that I noticed, that people who fly here, they really love it. It is not just another hobby. It becomes a passion. They're very passionate about doing it here, and really getting involved with special and very interesting types of flying that take place here in Alaska.
So one of the hooks in flying you today is we want to get you back next spring, and you can get a float ride and an off-airport landing and see some of the other missions that we fly.
Ooh, that would be incredible.
So one of the other things you were able to do, the FAA gave a couple presentations on some pretty unique Alaska programs, like the Weather Cams program, and some of the things that are special in Alaska. Any initial thoughts on that?
Oh yes, particularly related to the Weather Cam program. I was aware of it for many years, but this is the first time that I can actually get a detailed explanation of how it works and really the scope and the impact that it has on safety flying here in Alaska. I can tell you, I'm extremely impressed of how effective has been that system, not only in decreasing accidents, but improving safety, but how such a technology, which is very simple, has been so welcomed by the pilot community in the state, to the point that it is not, well, just another requirement. It is not a requirement, but people actually want it expanded and want to find ways on how to improve it even more. So this is probably something that is, well, not probably, it is something so unique here that was developed, it was implemented, it is being operated in Alaska, but I can see many parts of the world, particularly places where I have been around the world, where such a safety method, particularly in remote areas like this, could be applicable in many, many other places around the world. So it is truly something interesting. The people who are actually in charge of that program are very passionate about it. I mean, they love what they do, and it shows. And that also motivates them to go to the next step. And what's the next? How can we improve it? How can we make it more available to as many pilots as possible? So I'm truly, truly impressed about what has happened with that program.
Well, Dr. Mel, we've got just a minute left. I would like to just simply add to what you said. Walter Combs, of course, is the project manager for the Weather Cams, and he is passionate. And he's got some things coming down the road in the next couple of months that are going to make a good program even better. So I would tell you, our viewers, stay tuned, because I'm going to have Walter back on to talk about some of these things that Dr. Mel mentioned this evening. So again, what I'd like to emphasize to you, tune in. In the next couple of sessions, we'll have Dr. Mel back on to talk about the 4 areas that he's going to cover in the seminar tomorrow. Remember, Coast International, Saturday the 21st, registration at 8 a.m. And what we're going to talk about in the future: safety and survivability in general aviation, new trends in aviation technologies, effects of pilot exposure to lasers during flight, human factors, and safety issues of cockpit automation. These are the topics Dr. Mel will cover tomorrow at the seminar. I think you'll enjoy the whole day, so come early and stay late. But if you miss that or can't attend, tune in to Hangar Fly in the future, and we'll have a chance to talk to Dr. Mel about those. Dr. Mel, thanks for being on the program tonight.
Oh, thank you very much for the invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, fly safe.
Thanks a lot, Harry. We'll see you on Monday. As we look at Southeast, it's no surprise with the waves of weather moving through and the strong areas of low pressure still sitting over the Copper River Basin that the winds are going to come up, especially in the inner channels as we go through Saturday. Plan on storm force winds across the Lynn Canal. There's some higher gusts as well, much stronger than 50 knots. 10-foot seas are expected there. Southerlies will be strong through the central and southern parts of the inner channels. And then across the outer coast, westerlies predominantly there, 30 to 40 knots, 25-foot seas in the north, 17-foot seas outside of the Dixon entrance. By Sunday, conditions are improving. Winds are still a little bit on the higher side there across the inside, 10 to 20 knots, with 20 knots still going in the southern and northern Lynn canals with 4-foot seas there. Across the outer coast, 30 knots outside of Yakutat with a 20-foot sea, and also looking at 30 knots extending outside of the Dixon entrance from the north and west with an 18-foot sea there on Sunday. Across South Central, we'll see our strongest winds across the beginning of the weekend. Westerlies inside of Prince William Sound at 30 knots, 50-knot winds across the northern Gulf all the way through the eastern Barrens, 50 knots there with a 22 to 23-foot sea there, so certainly some very strong winds. South and westerlies coming in across the Cook Inlet region, 25 to as high as 45 knots on Saturday. Westerlies over Shelikof and across the eastern parts of Kodiak Island, 40 knots with a 19-foot sea there on Saturday. Everything looks a little bit better on Sunday. Northerlies still coming out of Prince William Sound will be blustery. Not as bad, though, across the north and western Gulf. Winds diminish to 30 knots. 10 to 14-foot seas in the western Gulf. 7-foot seas west of the Barrens on a 25-knot wind. Those westerlies continue northward toward Kenai, and northwesterlies cutting across the upper Cook Inlet region with southwesterlies inside of Shelikof Strait at 25 knots. Westerlies are expected to move across Bristol Bay and the North Pacific as we head through Saturday. Those running around 25 to 30 knots with 11 to 12-foot seas in the Bering, and we're expecting 17-foot seas there from Castle Cape to Chignik on Saturday. By Sunday, look for a west and southwesterly shift with 25 to 30 knots, 10-foot seas in the Pacific, 11 to 12-foot seas from Bristol Bay all the way down to Cold Bay on Sunday afternoon. For the Aleutians, westerlies moving all the way from Attu to Kiska, Adak, and Atka, 20 to 25 knots. But watch what happens on Sunday. This is a big change. Storm force winds develop west of Adak and Atka with 55 knots there from Kiska to Attu, 26 to 33-foot seas in the west, and 11 to 17-foot seas in the Bering Sea coast in the central and eastern chain, and 12 to as high as 22-foot seas there across the Pacific coast on Sunday. So big changes for Sunday. In the west, similar conditions there. North and westerly winds across the northern Bering with freezing spray north of St. Lawrence Island. Southwesterlies for the Pribilofs with an 11-foot sea. Remember, if you're in the west coast, watch the weather as we go through the weekend. Winds are coming up for St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew Island. I should say St. Matthew and the Pribilofs as we get into Sunday. 40 to 45 knot winds there from the south and southeast. Those stronger winds are shifting eastwards as we head into Monday. So again, if you're on the west coast in the Bering, watch the weather and watch for alerts for your community as we go into Sunday and Monday. For Saturday across the north coast, over the ice, north and easterly winds. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi Sea with the potential of freezing spray north of the Bering Strait. 30 knots there with a 6 to 10-foot sea. Winds diminish in all areas as we go through Sunday. Light winds north of Barrow and northwesterlies coming into Kotzebue Sound and Cape Lisburne at around 15 knots. The snow is going to fly across the interior and south central this weekend with additional accumulations with winter weather advisories from Anchorage all the way through the Matanuska Valley and the Copper River Basin, and for the interior, including Fairbanks and Tanana and Eagle. And it looks like areas east of Delta Junction could see sizable accumulations there, 4 to 7 inches or so by the time it's all done. For McGrath, you're under a winter storm warning, 10 to 18 inches there. Rainfall and wind for southeast with blizzard conditions ending in White Pass, but high winds continuing there with winter weather advisories out across St. Lawrence Island. Be careful this weekend and have a good one.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.